famous story in the book of Genesis, right? Abraham's just chilling by his tent, and suddenly 3 strangers appear. It's this incredible story about hospitality, but it's also become the center of a really fascinating theological puzzle. And today, we're going to try and solve it. Now, a really common way to look at this story, especially today, is to say that these weren't just any visitors. The claim is that this was actually a pre-incarnate visit from God himself. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit all showing up at Abraham's doorstep. I mean, that's a huge, huge claim. But here's the thing. What if the very first Christians didn't see it that way at all? It turns out there's this one tiny, crucial clue, just a single verse, tucked away in the New Testament that points us in a completely different direction. So let's play detective and follow the evidence. Okay, so let's set the scene really quick. We're in Genesis chapter 18. It's hot, Abraham's resting, and bam, 3 men appear out of nowhere. What does he do? He springs into action, offering them water, a place to rest, and a seriously impressive meal. This is like the textbook example of hospitality in the ancient world. And it's from this amazing scene of hospitality that the whole Trinitarian idea has really blossomed. The thinking goes that this isn't just about being nice to strangers, it's a foundational, Old Testament sneak peek of the triune nature of God. It's even used as a key proof text. But, as we're about to see, that's not exactly how the New Testament itself reads the story. All right, to crack this case, we have to fast forward to the New Testament, specifically to the book of Hebrews. The person who wrote this letter, well, they hold the key to understanding how the early church thought about Abraham's mysterious guests. And boom, here it is. This is the smoking gun. The author of Hebrews is trying to encourage people to be hospitable, and to make his point, he pulls out the ultimate example. Abraham, the father of faith, the model of welcoming others. And look at the exact words he uses. He doesn't say, some have entertained God, or some have entertained the Son. No, he says without any ambiguity that they entertained angels without even knowing it. The author of Hebrews flat out identifies Abraham's visitors as angels. Now you might think, okay, angels, Trinity, what's the big deal? Well, for the author of Hebrews, the difference between Jesus and an angel is not a small detail. It is quite literally one of the most important theological points in his entire letter. Seriously, the book kicks off with this massive, detailed argument that Jesus, the Son, is in a league of his own, way, way above any angel. The author spends the entire first chapter drawing this super sharp, uncrossable line in the sand between the Son and all other angelic beings. I mean, the contrast is just staggering. The Son is called God, and his throne is forever. What about the angels? They're called ministers, servants, winds and flame of fire. So for the author of Hebrews to turn around later and imply that Jesus was one of the 3 angels visiting Abraham, it would completely blow up his own argument from chapter 1. Let's look at another line of evidence. What the author of Hebrews doesn't say. Sometimes in an investigation, silence can be the most revealing clue of all. This author was not shy about seeing Jesus in the Old Testament. Not at all. Just look at Hebrews chapter 7. He takes this super obscure figure, Melchizedek, from Genesis 14, and he builds this complex, beautiful argument for how Melchizedek is a type, like a foreshadowing of Jesus' eternal priesthood. So when you put them side by side, it's crystal clear. When the author saw a connection to Jesus, like with Melchizedek, he spelled it out in incredible detail. But when he gets to Abraham's 3 visitors, what does he see? A moral lesson about being hospitable to angels. That silence about Jesus isn't an accident, it's a deliberate interpretive choice. But hey, it's not just the author of Hebrews. When we widen our lens and look at the historical traditions, both Jewish and Christian, we see that the angel interpretation has been the main one for a very, very long time. If you go back to ancient Jewish commentaries like the Bereshit Rabbah, the consensus was totally clear. The sages all understood these 3 figures to be individual angels, and they even figured out what each one's specific job was. And here are their assignments. Angel number 1 had the great job, go tell Sarah she's gonna have a son. Angel number 2 was the rescuer, go get Lot out of Sodom before it's too late. And angel number 3, well, he had the grim task of actually destroying the city. See? 3 distinct messengers, 3 distinct missions. And even way later, famous Christian commentators like Matthew Henry were really careful here. He knew about the Trinitarian idea, but he flat out refused to use this story as a doctrinal proof. Instead, what did he focus on? The moral of the story, hospitality. And guess which verse he used to prove his point? You got it, Hebrews 13:2. We've come full circle. Another highly respected voice, Charles Ellicott, was on the same page. He said that, sure, Christians have often seen an allusion to the Trinity in the number 3, but he was so careful to say it's just that, an allusion, not a solid proof. It shows this real respect for not making the text say more than it actually does. Okay, we've examined the New Testament's own testimony, we've looked at the author's internal logic, we've brought in historical witnesses. I think it's time to bring all the evidence together and deliver the final verdict based on what we found. So let's recap the case. 1. Hebrews 13:2 calls them angels. 2. The very same book, in its first chapter, insists Jesus is superior to angels, not one of them. 3. The author knew how to connect Old Testament figures to Jesus, but chose not to here. And 4. The wider historical tradition, both Jewish and Christian, backs up the angel interpretation. The conclusion, based on the New Testament's own witness, seems pretty clear. The story of Abraham's 3 visitors isn't presented as a secret revelation of the Trinity. Instead, it's held up as this powerful, timeless example of faith in action through radical, immediate hospitality to messengers sent by God, to angels. And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to chew on. This whole investigation shows how just one verse can completely reframe a story we thought we knew inside and out. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other assumptions do we carry with us, and what else might we discover if we look this closely at other familiar stories?